John, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. I ended up muting myself on both computers. Thank you. Okay, so I thought we'd actually start this session by sending everyone to breakout rooms because everyone's had some experience with them, and showing one technique on how breakout rooms could be used, and that is to have everyone suggest ways in which you might actually use breakout rooms. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to create, let me see how many people there are. We have 25 people. So I am going to, in just a second, create some breakout rooms, and I want you to discuss ways in which you might use them, in which you found good uses yourself or you've heard of other good uses. And in the chat, I'm going to send you a link to a document. And the document is a Google slideshow where you all have edit access. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of the breakout rooms to list some uses of breakout rooms on the slide with the number associated with their group. So I'm going to activate breakout rooms. We'll break up people into groups of 5. So I'm clicking on the breakout room tool, and I'm going to create 5 breakout rooms, and I'm going to use the automatic assignment, and I'm going to, in the options, I'm going to set the breakout rooms to last for, let's say, 6 minutes because we don't have much time in this session. And I am going to, actually, let's make it 5. So it's going to be a quick breakout room activity. And I'm going to open the rooms, go to the breakout rooms, and again, grab that URL and open that document that I shared in the chat for those who just arrived. It's right there. And I will open the room. So hop over to there and just add some possible uses of breakout rooms. Hi, Michael. We're doing a breakout room activity to discuss ways of using breakout rooms. And now, for those watching the video, I can monitor how people are doing in the breakout rooms by just clicking on the slideshow. And someone typed, "Are you here?" And I can type, "Yes." So I can see people opening the document. There are 13 people in it right now of the 25 participants, but only one person in the group needs to. And it looks like we've got some uses here. And we've got breakout group 5 is doing really well. And we only have 5 groups, so we can delete these extra pages. I'm seeing more and more people have opened the document. So I'm going to hop into one of the rooms.
I mean, who knows if we're going to be able to start, up in the classroom, hybrid or not. So probably a lot of our discussions are going to be on Zoom.
I'd say the answer to this is just you would use a breakout room for the same reason that you would break a class into small groups in a face-to-face class. I mean, sometimes you want students to talk about a case. Sometimes you want a group. I mean, it's just, I don't think the reason for using the breakout room is any different. I think the modality is different, but um, I think it's just a different tool to get out the same objective.
Mhm.
I mean, I wouldn't use a breakout room for a reason, for any other reason that I would use a group in a class. But John,
Might be,
maybe I'm the only one, but could you show us actually how to create the breakout rooms? Because I'm not sure how to do that.
What I'll the problem is we no longer have the ability to share the display of that while you're in a Zoom session. So I will share links on how to do it. There's some really good instructions that Zoom provides and other sites provide. So I'm going to share the slides at the end, and with those there are links to how to do
Okay.
it. But basically, you activate the breakout room tool, and you click on breakout rooms, create breakout rooms, and then you have three options. And the options are to randomly assign, manually assign, or self-assign. And you pick one of those, you pick the number of rooms, and then you click create rooms. And you have some options where you can create an automatic countdown, as we're seeing right now. If you'd like to speak, unmute yourself. I've just unmuted myself. We all got muted again when we came back. Now, what you didn't see is that if you went to one of the breakout rooms, I was actually talking a little bit about how we could monitor this, because one thing is, if you use small group activities, you can generally use breakout rooms for anything you'd use small group activities for, but there's actually some nice advantages for it if you do something like what we just did, where if you notice here, I have this little view of the slideshow I shared with everyone. So I was able to look at what was happening in each of the rooms. And I saw someone typed, "Are you here?" And I typed yes in response. It was a little laggy because there were so many people in the document. But you can see that now I had some extra slides because I didn't know how many people would be at the session. And I figured it's better to err on the side of more. But here's some suggestions. You could do interviews. You could provide specific interventions. It's a good way to get people talking and creating a more inclusive environment. People, especially in large classes, I had a class where I was using breakout rooms where I had 200 and up to 282 students in it. And, most students didn't want to talk there, or many of them use chat, but it gets kind of overwhelming if you're one of 280 some students. But if you're one of 6 or 7 or 8 or 10, limit to 50 breakout rooms, so there's a limit to just how many you can create. But it was a nice way for students to interact and have some small group discussions. And people are much more comfortable talking in a small group. They're more likely to turn the camera on. And you have all these wonderful tools in terms of shared documents, sharing screens. You can do annotations, you can do drawings, you can use a whiteboard tool. And it's actually in many ways more powerful than just sending people in classes in a group, especially if they have to be 6 feet apart. Lynn.
yeah, I'm just wondering, I think our group didn't put anything in there because we didn't have time, but I like doing in-class workshops with students. Is there a way that you as the instructor or the host can go from breakout room to breakout room, sort of to check in with students?
You can. When I had 50 rooms, actually, there was a problem at first. I could only create 48 for some reason. If I tried doing that, it just froze. I don't know if it was a bug and if that's been fixed, but I tried it for about a week and I couldn't get beyond 48. So I would hop in, but I couldn't hop in all 48 of them.
Right.
So one
I'm thinking of like four
yeah,
groups I
if you
could
got
hop
4
in.
groups, you can. There's a little bit of overhead. It takes like 20 seconds or so to go in and another 20, 30 seconds to go out.
Okay.
So unless you're doing it for a really extended period, you're not going to be able to visit all of them, or at least not spend too much time because of that overhead cost. But this is a nice way of monitoring what groups are doing. So I could see there was nothing in this group, but we've got some things coming in here. And this group actually had started work really quickly and put in some things quite nicely. And if this is a type of activity you do regularly, you could use something like this where everyone has their own slide, but you could also use a Google Sheet where you have a series of categories and ask people, have a column for each teams, or you could use a Google form if you don't want them to see what other groups are working on at the same time, where you had the group submit form responses for the whole group that you could then share with the whole group later so they could see what other groups see if you didn't want them working in the same, simultaneously, and being able to see what other people were doing, because some groups might just kind of copy and paste the ideas. But one thing you do want to do in a breakout room, and did I close my other window? Okay, no, I didn't. Let me just hop out of here back to the presentation, because there's a lot to do in 20 minutes. But those are all good reasons. And basically, I did hop into one of the breakout rooms, and Steve suggested one of the things you do is just wherever you use small group activities before, you'd use them in Zoom. But there are some nice tools in it, and that's what we just did. When I use them in my large class, I'd always get maybe about 20% of the groups complaining that students wouldn't talk. There was actually a session I gave back when we were giving live sessions in conferences with like 60 or 70 people at a conference. And we sent people into breakout tables where they had small group discussions, and everyone was sitting there really quietly. And then my co-presenter said, well, first introduce yourself and then start talking. And once they did that, they opened up. They just had to break that initial barrier. So giving them, encouraging them to introduce themselves at the start generally makes it easier for the discussions to continue beyond that. Yeah, Lynn.
So how many, we only had 5 minutes for our breakout room. What, if you have a typical like 55-minute class or an hour and 20-minute class, how long do you think a breakout room should last? 15 minutes, 20 minutes?
It depends on the task. If, for example, you want to do something like a think, pair, share, it might be 3 to 5 minutes. If you want to have them work to produce some sort of a document or some sort of a project, it could be 20 minutes. It could be a half an hour. It could be, it could be 40 minutes, depending on the task. And it depends on whether you have persistent groups that are working together. It depends on what you have them doing outside of class. So the best answer to that is, it depends on what they're doing and what the learning objectives for the activity are. So, the length can vary depending on the intended purpose. But one thing that's important is you give them a specific task so that there's something where they're accountable, where there's something they have to produce, because if they know they have to produce something, they're more likely to actually use that time productively. As I just said, asking them to introduce themselves, particularly at the beginning of the semester, and it's the first time they're working. You can also, and this is the way I use it most often in my large class, I'd give them polling questions. I see how they did. This is a technique that Eric McZor did. I think I may even have that on a slide coming up. But I'd ask them to answer a question. I'd poll them, actually using iClicker, but you could do it with the poll tool in Zoom. And then if most of them got it right, we just discuss it and move on. I'd have them type some things in chat, explain their answers and so forth. But if they're struggling with a question, if it's a more challenging problem where they had to do some calculations, I'd send them into small groups, have them discuss the answer, bring them back, and then have them vote on it again to see. And there's almost always some improvement. So it's a nice way of doing some peer instruction for peer feedback. They could do workshopping. If they're doing presentations, they could always go in and work on that. And as I just said, and as we saw, you can use Google Slide Sheets or forms to monitor the progress. And also, when they're first doing it, remind them that they can use the chat, the whiteboard, and screen shares for any collaboration they do. And that's a really powerful part of the use of breakout rooms. very quickly because we are running out of time. And one second, I'm going to stop the recording in the other room. And you can either pre-assign, if you're going to have persistent groups meeting to do team-based activities, if you're doing team-based learning, project-based learning, or other persistent group tasks, you can create those, especially now that we have registrations enabled for a domain, something I've been asking for well, since last spring, and we now have it. All students can sign into their accounts. You can create that, and those groups would be persistent. So if you're going to do persistent groups, you can do that in the setup, basically. Random is useful if you just want to do some quick discussions, or you could use manual assignment, which is something I generally don't do unless there's a specific reason for it. And one other type is self-selection, and that's a new feature that we picked up recently. Once you create them, so there's a question in chat, how do you use them from one class to the next? If you create it for a class group and you use that class URL as a repeating event occurring throughout the term, then that will maintain them for the rest of that. So as long as you create a repeating meeting and you have it set up for repeats and you use that URL each time, those pre-assigned groups should work for the rest of the semester. It does require that students log in, but if you require authentication by a login from Zoom, that should work. Now, some students might, depending on how you have your settings, they might come in and you may have to move them, but you could ask them which group they're in and then manually assign them. And actually, I've got to end the other session. One second. Okay. Now, this is going to be far too quick, but I'm going to share these slides with you in just a minute, and they have some links on how to set them up and how to run the breakout rooms. And the Zoom instructions on that's really good, and that's right in there. Now, polls, again, we're just going to touch on this, but there's a lot of good reasons for using polling. You can use them at the start of a discussion, or if you're introducing new topics, to provoke students' curiosity, raise some questions, make them wonder about something, to get them thinking about it, activating their prior knowledge. When you do that, it makes it more likely that they'll remember things later. Even if they've never seen the topic before, it gets them thinking about it and it primes them to be ready to learn new material. And you could use it to assess what they've done outside of class. If you're using a flipped class arrangement, have start a class. If you ask them to read something or listen to a podcast or watch a video, do some polling to see how much they've picked up from it. And you can also use it to get students' opinions on a topic before or after a discussion or other learning activity. An interesting thing is to poll students on their attitudes concerning a topic before you discuss it in class, and then poll them again, and then discuss how their opinions changed and talk about why their opinions changed. It's a nice opportunity for reflection. You can also use it so that both you and the students get to understand what they know and what they don't know as well as they'd like. So from your standpoint, it lets you do some just-in-time teaching to clear up any misperceptions your students have right when they're ready for it, right when they've revealed that they don't understand things in the way that you think they perhaps should be. But it also is giving them feedback themselves on what they didn't pick up from the readings or the assignment or whatever you've been talking about. And again, improving student metacognition can help them become more effective learners in the future. And I already talked about this very briefly. Eric Mazur has developed a polling methods which leads, and yes, there is information in the slides on how to create a poll. I can't really show that because it's because you can't display the setup from that while you're in the thing itself. But ask, and this is what I just described, ask a poll question, send students to the breakout rooms, poll again, and then discuss it. And I'm just going to, we're not going to go into this in detail, but I am going to set up I'm just going to show a really quick application of a poll. I created a poll for this group, and let me see what I did here. and I set it up in a different account. So that's not going to be all that helpful. And it looks like I'm working in 3 different accounts today. So the polling that you set up is specific to the account in which it's set up and the rooms that it's set up in. And this is not going to be very helpful. This was a poll I actually used in my class. I gave students some options in terms of how they could interact with each other. I forgot what it was for actually. But basically the poll is out there. It's set up to, I see 1 response. I'm getting to see the results as they come in. You don't, you get a little histogram display. I don't even remember the context for this. Might have been actually in another group. I don't remember. Okay, so I'm seeing the polling there, and you should see it on your devices. This is designed so it fits in a mobile device if students are connecting to your class with a mobile. And see, here's the polling results now. I'm going to share them, and the instructor gets the option of sharing the results or not. And then you have the option also at the bottom of relaunching the poll. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, that's really quick, sorry. Is I'm going to share the slide deck, and here, let me put this in chat. Let me, this will give you a copy of the slides, and that I believe has links to how to set up the, sorry about that. This should have links telling you how to set up the polls, how to use it, how to set up breakout rooms and use it. If anyone needs any help one-on-one, I'm happy to meet with you. A really good way of doing this is practices with other people, and I'm willing to do that with anyone if they want to try it before you do it in class, or get some people in your department who might be interested in trying the same tools and take turns serving as host of the meeting. So because only the host, whoever is a host at the time, can set up the poll and administer the polls and create and administer breakout rooms. So
John, let me just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me just tell you quickly. I just clicked on it and it didn't open. It sent me to something that said, Google Slide, do I want to make a copy?
oh, yes, yes. And what it will do is it will make a copy of your own that you could then edit and use. So yes, choose yes, and it will add the presentation to your slide deck, to your Google Drive.
Thank you.
I do that with these for a couple of reasons. One is that you'll have that link there, and if I update and fix some things in the slides, you can always click on it again and get a new copy of it. And that way you have edit access, so you could add your own notes or things to it. And by the way you do that is you create a share link with either edit or view access, and you remove the parts that say view, etc., or edit, etc., and just replace it with the word copy in the URL. And that lets you share a copy of anything you create. It could be a Google document, it could be a Google Slides or spreadsheet or anything else. And it's a really nice way of sharing Drive files with other people so that they have access to them, even if you delete it or do something, accidentally get rid of it. Okay, any quick questions? Okay, I'm going to end this session then and render some videos, and I'll be back after starting up the other section as well. Stop the share.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.